The storm had no mercy that night. Rain carved rivers down the trembling glass, and each thunderclap seemed to echo from within her chest. Elara sat alone beside a flickering candle, its flame bending with every gust that pressed against the walls of her small home. The silence between the thunder was louder than the storm itself, a silence thick with memories, each one whispering a truth she had tried to bury. Her hands trembled around a cup of untouched tea, the warmth long gone. In her reflection upon the window, she saw not a face, but fragments of a woman who once believed peace could be found by running from pain. Yet tonight, she could no longer run. Something inside had shifted, a quiet ache that no longer wanted escape, but understanding. And as lightning split the sky, she wondered, what if the way out of the storm was through it? The storm quieted by dawn, leaving a heavy stillness that felt almost cruel. The world outside her window was washed pale, the sea calmer, the sky bruised but soft. Elara sat wrapped in a blanket on the floor, surrounded by the remnants of her night. Crumpled pages, melted wax, a half-empty cup of cold tea. Her body ached, her eyes red, but inside there was a strange clarity, like the first breath after sobbing. She realized she had been afraid not of pain itself, but of the silence it left behind. In that silence, everything she'd ignored waited patiently. Grief, guilt, love. She never gave herself. The morning light touched her face, and for the first time in years, she didn't flinch from it. She whispered to no one, her voice hoarse yet tender. Maybe this is where it begins. Not in escape, but in staying. Later that morning, she walked along the shoreline barefoot, the sand cold and wet beneath her feet. The world felt raw, every sound sharper, every breath slower. The sea, once violent, now sighed like a tired creature. She watched the waves fold into themselves and thought of how many times she had done the same. Pain, she realized, was not an enemy, but a mirror. It showed her the places she had abandoned within herself. The wind lifted her hair and carried the scent of salt and seaweed, and for a moment she felt something break. Not a wound, but a wall. The sun slipped between the clouds, touching her with a faint warmth that felt like forgiveness. She found herself drawn to the cliffs beyond the bay, the place she used to sit with her thoughts before life grew too heavy. The path was overgrown now, the stones slick with moss, but she climbed anyway. Each step felt like walking through a memory. When she reached the top, the sea stretched endlessly below her, wild and beautiful. Elara closed her eyes and let the wind rush against her face. In that moment, she felt both small and infinite. The pain she carried didn't vanish, but it loosened, as if something larger had taken it into its arms. She whispered into the wind, not to be heard, but to release, I'm still here. And the wind, almost tender, seemed to answer, yes, you are. That night, as the storm's memory lingered in the walls, Elara returned to her journal. The pages were wrinkled, stained with candle wax and rain, but she began to write, not to explain, but to listen. Each word felt like a step deeper into herself. She wrote about the loneliness, the guilt, the fear, and then, slowly, about the beauty she saw hiding behind them. The act of writing became prayer, not asking for rescue, but giving shape to her silence. When she finished, the room was still. The candle flickered weakly beside her, its flame trembling as if alive. She closed the book, exhaled softly, and for the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. Fragile, but real. Morning came cloaked in fog, thick enough to hide the horizon. The sea was barely visible, a breathing presence beneath the mist. Elara stood at her window again, feeling the quiet settle into her bones. There was a new weight to the silence. Not the silence of absence, but of listening. For the first time, she sensed her pain wasn't trying to destroy her. It was trying to be understood. Each ache, each wound carried a memory that wanted to be seen. As she pressed her palm to the cold glass, she whispered, "Show me." The fog outside swirled faintly, as if something unseen had heard her. In that soft gray stillness, the mirror within her began to turn, revealing reflections she had long refused to face. She found an old box tucked beneath her bed, one she hadn't opened since the days when she still believed time could heal everything without effort. Inside were letters, photographs, and a small seashell that once meant something she could no longer remember. As she sifted through them, she felt her chest tighten, not with regret, but recognition. These were fragments of the woman she used to be. The one who smiled through breaking, who called pain strength because she was afraid to call it what it truly was: grief. She held a photograph to her chest, eyes closed, and realized that every version of her still lived inside her, waiting to be forgiven. By afternoon, the fog had lifted, and the world beyond her cottage shimmered in silver light. Illyra walked to the shoreline again, drawn by a pull she couldn't explain. The tide was low, revealing stones, smooth and glistening from the receding sea. She picked one up, cool, dark, and shaped like a heart that had been weathered by centuries. Turning it in her hand, she saw her reflection in its wet surface and felt something stir inside her chest. Maybe pain wasn't meant to be conquered, but carried with tenderness, the way the sea carries every broken shell back to shore. The wind brushed her cheek, and she smiled faintly, almost unrecognizably soft. That evening, she lit a single candle in the center of her room and sat before it, eyes closed. The walls hummed with quiet. In her stillness, she began to feel her breath, slow, deep, and full. Images rose and fell behind her eyelids, faces she loved, words left unsaid, moments where she chose silence instead of truth. Each memory burned briefly, like sparks in the dark, before dissolving into peace. The voice inside her, once a whisper of fear, now sounded calm and familiar. "You were never broken," it said gently. "You were only becoming." A tear slid down her cheek, and she let it fall without shame. That night, the wind carried a faint melody through the cracks in the window. Not a song she recognized, but one that felt ancient, like a memory of peace. She lay in bed, eyes open to the soft glow of moonlight across her sheets. The world seemed to hum in rhythm with her heartbeat. In that quiet, she realized how much of her life had been spent fighting the stillness she now found comforting. Pain had not left her. It had changed shape, become gentle, like a tide that no longer threatened to drown her, but rocked her to rest. As she closed her eyes, she whispered to the darkness, "Thank you." And for the first time, the night felt kind. Sleep came heavy and strange. Illyra drifted into dreams that felt more like memories, corridors of her own past where laughter once lived and faded. She walked through a house that looked like her childhood home, though its walls breathed like lungs, and whispers of old arguments echoed faintly. She saw herself in younger forms, moments where she pretended to be unhurt, moments where she learned silence too early. The dream pressed close, almost suffocating, until she woke with tears already on her face. The candle had long gone out. The room was dim, but she sensed something alive in the dark. Not a threat, but a presence. Her own pain had come to speak, and this time she did not turn away. She rose and walked to the mirror. The reflection that met her was familiar but not gentle. Eyes darker, face older, mouth trembling at truths unspoken. She reached out, fingers tracing the glass, and it felt almost warm. Her reflection blinked a moment after she did, lagging slightly, as though alive on its own. A voice, her voice yet not hers, whispered through her mind. "You cannot heal what you refuse to see." Her knees weakened. She pressed her forehead to the mirror, and in that contact she saw flashes, the mistakes, the betrayals, the love she had pushed away. Her reflection did not condemn her. It simply looked back, waiting for her to finally stop hiding. The day outside was harshly bright, almost indifferent. Ilara wandered through the nearby forest path she once loved, but had avoided for years. The earth was damp beneath her bare feet, leaves clinging to her skin. Every sound, the crunch of twigs, the sigh of branches, reminded her how alive the world was, even when she wasn't. As she reached a clearing, memories hit like wind. The person she once loved, the promises broken, the pain she buried here. She fell to her knees, pressing her palms into the earth, tears mixing with soil. "I forgive you," she whispered, and realized she wasn't speaking to anyone else. That evening, rain returned. Soft at first, then relentless. Ilara sat by the fireplace, a blanket over her shoulders, staring into the flames as though they held secrets. The fire's dance reminded her of her own mind. Wild, consuming, yet alive with possibility. She remembered the moments she had broken down in front of others, and called it weakness. Now she saw it differently. Maybe the breaking was the cleansing. The wood hissed, sparks rising like fleeting stars. She whispered, "I forgive me," and the fire seemed to bow in response, flickering with quiet approval. As the night deepened, she stepped outside once more. The rain had stopped, leaving the world drenched and shimmering beneath the moon. The air smelled of renewal. She walked toward the sea, her reflection trembling across the wet sand. For the first time, she didn't see her pain as something chasing her. It walked beside her, steady and quiet. When the tide touched her toes, she closed her eyes and let the chill climb her legs, feeling both fragile and whole. "I'm not who I was," she whispered. The waves answered in rhythm, carrying her words back into the dark, not as echoes of loss, but of arrival. Morning unfolded like a whisper. A sky brushed in pale gold, the sea breathing softly against the shore. Ilara awoke feeling lighter, though nothing external had changed. As she stepped outside, the air shimmered faintly, almost humming with presence. It was as if the world itself leaned in to listen. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, sensing something vast moving through her chest, not outside of her, but from within. The voice came not as sound, but as knowing. You were never lost. You were only remembering. Tears welled, but they no longer burned. She smiled. The smallest curve of peace, realizing that the voice she longed to hear had always spoken in her own silence. She spent the day in silence, letting the stillness teach her. Every movement became deliberate, pouring tea, folding blankets, opening windows to let in salt air. In each small act, she felt an invisible rhythm guiding her, like an unseen hand resting over her heart. Thoughts came and went without argument. The voice within whispered gently between them, weaving peace where fear once lived. It told her to soften, to listen not for meaning but for truth. And as she did, the world outside seemed to slow, aligning with her breath, as though existence itself had begun to breathe with her. That evening, as dusk deepened, she walked to the cliffs again. The horizon was painted in shades of lavender and rose, the kind of light that makes the soul ache with beauty. Standing there, she felt the voice more clearly than ever, not speaking words, but pulsing through her veins. It wasn't separate from her. It was her. Every loss, every sorrow had carved a path for it to reach her now. She spread her arms wide, the wind pressing against her body, and whispered into the sky, "I'm ready." The world seemed to hold its breath. Then the wind shifted, circling her like a blessing. Later that night, she lit another candle, though she no longer needed its light. She sat by the window and listened, not to the wind, but to the stillness beneath it. The voice returned, clearer now, carrying warmth and certainty. "You are the calm you have been seeking," it said. She realized then that peace was never something to find, but something to uncover, like clearing mist from a mirror until her own reflection could finally smile back. The flame before her trembled, and for a brief, impossible moment, it bent toward her hand, as if bowing to the truth it had witnessed. As midnight fell, she stepped outside once more, drawn by the pull of the moon. The ocean stretched endless before her, silver under its light. The voice within her merged with the rhythm of the waves, each one echoing her heartbeat. She understood now. Her pain had never been punishment. It had been the language through which her soul had learned to speak. She stood there for a long time, barefoot in the sand, the cool wind brushing her cheeks like a tender hand. In that vast silence, she whispered a single truth, not to the sea, but to herself. I am whole. The following morning arrived without ceremony. Soft light, gentle wind, a sea breathing in rhythm with her heart. Ilara opened the window and felt the cool air kiss her skin. There was no heaviness anymore, only space. For years she had tried to carry every wound like a duty, believing healing meant control. Now she understood it was the opposite. Healing was the art of loosening the fist. She watched the curtains billow, their fabric moving as freely as her breath. A quiet smile found her lips, one born not from joy, but from release. A kind of peace that asked for nothing, needed nothing, but simply was. Later, she carried the old box from beneath her bed to the shore. The same one filled with letters, photos, and echoes of old selves. The tide was low and the sky stretched wide and forgiving. She sat on the wet sand, opening the box one final time. Each item she held felt lighter now. No longer chains, but chapters. One by one, she released them to the sea. The photograph, the letter, the seashell. The water received them without judgment, pulling them gently into its depths. When the box was empty, she smiled and let it drift away too. The tide claimed it softly, like a mother, gathering what was never lost, only returned. By afternoon, clouds gathered, not as storms, but as quiet reminders that even peace has its shadows. Ilara sat in her garden, breathing in the scent of damp earth and salt air. She realized she no longer feared the arrival of pain. She had made peace with its rhythm. The voice within her was now a hum beneath her ribs, steady and kind. Every ending is an opening, it whispered. She touched her chest lightly and felt her heart beat, calm, assured, alive. The garden around her swayed with the wind, and she felt herself swaying too, not in resistance, but in flow. That evening, she returned to her writing desk. The same place where her trembling hands once hesitated now felt sacred. The pages before her were blank, but they no longer frightened her. She dipped her pen and began to write, not about pain or loss, but about the space they had left behind. Her words were simple: gratitude, stillness, breath. She wrote until the candle's flame softened into gold, and she could feel her heart beating in sync with the quiet around her. The pages filled with gentle truths, not stories of survival, but of becoming. For the first time, her writing felt like home. When night returned, she stepped outside to watch the horizon fade into starlight. The air was cool, the ocean gentle, and her heart unburdened. She realized there was nothing left to release, only to live. The world around her seemed to breathe with her, every wave and wind a reflection of her calm. She closed her eyes and whispered a final prayer. Not for change, not for answers, but for gratitude. Thank you for every wound that taught me how to love what is. The sea shimmered in reply, its voice soft and endless, carrying her peace into the dark. The morning light felt different now, softer, yet more alive, as though it had learned her name. Ilara woke before sunrise. The world still wrapped in silver blue calm. The sea was gentle, and her heart for once matched its rhythm. She walked outside, the earth cool beneath her feet, and smiled at the horizon. She no longer searched for signs of healing. She simply lived inside it. Her breath felt sacred, her movements unhurried. Each small thing, the scent of salt, the hum of waves, the softness of wind, became a prayer of existence. she whispered. I made it through. Not as triumph, but as truth. Later that morning, she tended to her garden, the small patch of green she once neglected. Kneeling among the soil, she felt the simple miracle of life beneath her fingertips. Each plant she touched seemed to hum with silent gratitude. She realized she was no longer trying to fix or become anything. She was simply participating in the beauty of being. A butterfly landed on her wrist, fragile yet fearless. She smiled at its stillness, sensing a shared understanding. Transformation is not loud, not sudden. It's a gentle unfolding, one petal at a time. By afternoon, she walked into town for the first time in months. The world felt brighter yet quieter inside her. She greeted people she once avoided, not with apology, but with presence. Conversations were simple, sincere, alive. Every face she saw reflected something she had learned. Everyone carries a silent war. Everyone seeks a little peace. When a stranger smiled at her, she returned it without hesitation, realizing how far she had come. Peace, she thought, wasn't hiding from the world. It was standing in it, unguarded, unafraid, and open. That evening, as the sun lowered into the sea, she returned to the cliffs once more. The air shimmered gold and rose, and the ocean stretched vast and forgiving. Elara sat at the edge, legs folded beneath her, watching the horizon dissolve into color. The voice within her was quiet now, not gone, just merged into her breath. She no longer needed its guidance. She had become it. As the wind wrapped around her shoulders, she whispered, I'm home. The sea responded with its endless sigh, and in that moment she understood. Peace wasn't the absence of storm. It was the calm that learned to dance within it. Night fell like a slow exhale. The stars appeared one by one, patient and eternal. Elara lay in her bed, the window open to the lull of the waves. She traced invisible constellations with her fingers against the sheet, feeling their rhythm match her own. Her heart no longer ached. It pulsed steady, quiet, free. She realized that rebirth wasn't a moment of light bursting open, but a steady softening into truth. In her final waking thought, she smiled, eyes glistening in moonlight, and whispered, I am peace. Outside, the sea answered in silence, and silence at last was enough. Dawn returned in silence. No thunder, no waves crashing, just the tender hum of life waking gently. Elara rose slowly and stepped outside, her bare feet pressing into dew-soaked grass. The world was the same, yet everything felt reborn. She breathed in deeply, her chest expanding with quiet gratitude. Peace, she realized, was not a prize she had earned, but a home she had rediscovered. Every sound, the whisper of leaves, the cry of a gull, blended into one soft rhythm. She closed her eyes and smiled. There was no search left, no past to grieve, no future to chase. Only this, the steady, unbroken now. She spent the morning by the shore, gathering driftwood and stones, not for purpose, but for presence. Each piece she touched felt sacred, shaped by time, polished by patience. Sitting among them, she felt the truth she had chased for years unfold quietly in her chest. Everything returns to peace if you let it. She placed the stones in a circle around her, small tokens of gratitude for every lesson pain had offered. The wind brushed her cheek, and she laughed softly, surprised at the sound. Light, unguarded, new. The sea answered with a shimmer of sunlit foam. Home. As afternoon came, Elara sat by her window, sipping tea while sunlight moved slowly across the floor. She no longer filled the hours with thought. She simply watched. Light shifting, waves passing, time breathing. In stillness, she felt the pulse of everything, the subtle heartbeat of existence. She realized then that calm was not the absence of movement, but the quiet awareness beneath it. The voice within her had become silence itself, soft and infinite. She whispered, "I understand, not to anyone but to life." The words melted into the air like steam rising from her cup. When dusk arrived, the sky burned in slow hues of rose and gold. Alara walked along the water's edge, each step sinking softly into the sand. The tide kissed her ankles, warm and alive. She thought of the woman she once was, the one who feared silence, who ran from her own reflection, and felt only tenderness. Every sorrow had been a teacher, every night a doorway. The calm she carried now was not fragile. It was rooted, vast, and real. She lifted her gaze to the horizon and whispered, "Thank you," her voice blending with the sigh of the sea. Night settled like a lullaby. Stars reflected across the sea, their shimmer meeting her steady breath. Ilara sat at the edge of the shore, knees drawn to her chest, watching the moon trail its light across the water. She felt neither beginning nor ending now, only the tender continuity of being. Pain had become wisdom. Stillness had become song. The voice within her had disappeared because it no longer needed to speak. She placed a hand over her heart, smiling softly, and whispered, "I am home." The waves echoed back, folding her words into their rhythm, carrying them into eternity.